Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you've had a wonderful week so far. If you notice a lack of energy, I'm slightly under the weather, and honestly, I can't really be asked to fake. So, if it's a little bit slower than usual, then you know why. When I was initially drafting the slides for this video, or even thinking about it, I wasn't particularly excited about making it just because there wasn't too much to discuss. And then out of nowhere, quite a few things came up, particularly because of what I've seen in the press conferences and injury updates. So now we actually have quite an interesting set of things to discuss. You see my team on screen, and in my team selection video, I was like, I'm rolling, I'm rolling, I'm rolling. But there is one move in particular, which you will see, that I am becoming very, very tempted to make. And I'm not going to decide now if I'm going to make it. I'll probably decide later tonight, and then I will happily post about whether I have done so. Before we hop into it, if you could subscribe, I would be very grateful as we push for 4,000 subscribers. About 50% of you who watch aren't subscribed, which is a lot. So if you could just click the button, I would be very grateful. But without anything else needing to be said, let's get into it. So before we start the discussion into Phil Foden, a quick thing. In the bottom paragraph, it's meant to be, could we actually sell Saka and then Salah not so much? I do my graphics in a way whereby once I make them, I export them and I can't go back to them. So that's why there's a mistake there. All right, let's just start from the top. Why am I so interested in Phil Foden all of a sudden? Well, from what I read earlier in the week, and I spoke about in my Everything You Need to Know video, De Bruyne was meant to be back. That's what I read online, and I was just like, okay, cool, fair enough. But he isn't. And if he's not back for Wolves, he almost definitely won't start Southampton. And I think Bournemouth away is a game which suits Foden quite well, as we'll come on to. Plus, in terms of the physical needs, it's probably not the best game to reintegrate De Bruyne from the start anyway. So if I'm to get 3 starts and probably around 80 to 90 minutes for Phil Foden with 3 very good fixtures, okay, that's very positive. Then you look at the exit routes and the practicality of it, and I'm still not really interested in selling Salah. I think he could do well against Chelsea. I'm more bullish than most for his chance against Arsenal, and obviously I would like to captain him in Game Week 10, as I've spoken about. That's that. But if you have Cole Palmer, I really would be considering it as well. As I've mentioned many times, I really don't like this fixture run for Palmer, and I think it's a fantastic exit route to a guy who will be owned by only a few and has a lot of upside, as we've seen, right? 2 Premier League hat-tricks, I believe, in the last season. That's a big deal. Like, there are not a lot of midfielders who are doing that. 2 is really impressive. So, again, I would most definitely be at least considering it. Now, let's go a bit more into the analysis for him specifically and why I think his prospects will be pretty good. If you look at Wolves, particularly maybe the game against Liverpool, and you watch how they defend, it's quite aggressive, and their midfielders or their +1 essentially is willing to jump. And what I notice is with their game model as well and their system, there's always these pockets of space that can be found, and fairly big pockets of space that can be found in front of the defensive line. And Foden operating in there with his level of ball striking from outside the box, but also even feeding Haaland. There's a lot of points to be had there. On transition, which is something Wolves usually offer you, assuming they play the same system. Again, one of the best people to exploit it. So, for all of those reasons, I like him this week. Against Bournemouth, given they press you high, there's less need for someone to drop him because the build-up is going to be at a far quicker pace. And therefore, I think he'll be stationed higher compared to what he usually is overall. He won't need to drop in and help within the second, third phase. And there'll be a lot of instances where he will just have to operate in these small pockets, which he excels at. And for all of those reasons, I think that could actually be quite a nice fixture for him. And then Southampton in 9 is obviously the standout fixture. Now, from a tactical perspective, I'm not sure how Martin sets up. I think maybe he actually does go with a bit of a deeper, more compact block, and he isn't looking to play out as much as he has done in the past. But he's also been fairly adamant that this is the way he's going to play. So regardless, it's a pretty good fixture, if not, a very good fixture, right? So the next 3 are really, really good in terms of his prospects. I've obviously spoken about how I'm not really looking to sell Salah. I spoke about how I would love to sell Palmer if I owned him to get there, and I would definitely be considering that if I was you. And then in terms of Saka, he's got his own section. But the other thing I would say is it also frees up some cash for me. I can now go DCL to Cunha without having to make moves elsewhere. Not that I'm really interested in doing that in the short term, but I could also sell Semenyo next week now for McNeil. And the fact that it frees up cash alongside the fact that I think I'm going to get upside is what's really pushed me over the edge. Plus, like I said, I just don't think I can allow like a £10 million asset to just sit on the bench this week Then he's got Liverpool, which I actually think he could do pretty well in, but it's still Liverpool. And then he's got 2 fixtures which are away. And if you look at the returns home and away, obviously he's had 3 tough away games. There's a huge disparity, but the next 2 away games are pretty tough as well, right? So for all of those reasons, Saka to Foden is definitely on the menu. I think Everton deserve their own section because their assets are very appealing to me. With Branthwaite and Mikalenko coming back, you can expect their defense to significantly improve and the whole side to improve for a variety of fairly obvious reasons, right? When you're getting back some of your better players and you become more secure as a unit. The fixtures in the next, well, the fixtures for a while are very good, and 3 out of the next 4 are away, and I think that provides Jordan Pickford, who's only 4.8 million now following 2 price decrease, an opportunity to get a haul. Because let's take someone like Ipswich away. They'll make chances, for sure, they'll make chances, but they're also not the best attack in the world either, right? And Everton are a pretty good defense, and Sean Dyche is a very good defensive coach. So, with all that in mind, you therefore have the opportunity for Pickford to haul. Should you be on a wild card? Should you be looking at making a goalkeeper transfer? This is something I like. You also have Mikalenko at 4.3, which is a very, very cheap price for a defender with this run, with some attacking upside, limited, but some. And he's, like I said, he's playing in a good unit with good fixtures. So for me, I think Everton's defense really, really must be looked from next week. I like the Brentford defense as well. I like Ait-Nouri from 10. And you could probably get away with a really cheap defense of like Pinnock, Ait-Nouri, Mikalenko, and Gabriel, and then maybe have like a double up with Pickford or Sells in goal. And I think shifting to this structure and these players in particular could be very advantageous. But what I really wanted to speak about was the attack, because I think this is more accessible to people in the current moment. I think people aren't really looking to make too many defensive transfers, and in most cases the defense is fairly well set, and people have just got more money there anyway, so not too big of a deal. I'm still okay holding DCL. As I mentioned in the video 2 days ago, he's still showing enough at that price with those fixtures to justify keeping him. But the one that I really like is Dwight McNeil. And I think at 5.7 million, he could prove to be exceptional value. You can pretty much leave him as a set and forget because the fixture run is so good. He's got set pieces and he's a player with genuine quality, right? Like his technical level is actually quite high and has been for a number of years now, and it's probably gone under the radar. And also, he's playing this new number 10 role. And for those of you who remember, it was a different number 10 role. It was more box crushing with Decore, right? But he thrived, and he returned managers a lot of points in those early weeks for whatever season it was. And I imagine in this 10 role, whilst McNeil won't have the same functions, it will still be something where he's platformed in a way where he can generate attacking returns. And for all of those reasons, at that price, I think he probably establishes himself now at least maybe a couple weeks on it. It's really poor from him that he establishes himself as the best cheap midfield option. I like Smith Rowe. I obviously like Rodgers, etc., etc. But for me, McNeil probably he's probably ahead of the pack at the moment. And I would really be considering him, even bringing him in this week and like doubling with DCL. For example, if I had an extra free transfer, I'd move Semenyo to McNeil, because I do think you could actually get quite a bit of change out of Everton, and I could just rise in price quite quickly. Right, as spoken about, Spurs' next 4 fixtures are very good from an attacking standpoint. However, I don't think it's worth getting Heung-min Son, especially now that Phil Foden exists in a far better light, because you're not even 100% sure if he's going to start. I know Ange's comments have been very positive, but you're not 100% sure if he's going to start. And I think when you're paying this price, you need to be. And even if he does start, surely he has to come off early, right? He's just coming back from injury. So that's another thing. Then, while Spurs have looked good going forward, an Ange winger, even though Brennan Johnson is on fire, an Ange winger is never, the winger is never platformed in the best possible way for their own output. Spurs also have the spread of output between Kulusevski, Maddison, Solanke, Johnson, and the left winger, assuming it's Son. So for all those reasons, I would just be a little cautious. I would say you could wait a week at least and see where he lands. I would say the upside is there because he is such a good player. He is such a good finisher, and the next 4 fixtures are very solid. I just don't think the reward outweighs the risk, though, in this particular scenario, and thus I would be fading. I know on X, for example, a lot of people are quite high on him. For me, though, I think you have to tame that interest slightly when you consider the risk associated. A week ago, if you told me I would be considering selling Saka and strongly considering it ahead of Gameweek 8, I would have called you crazy. But here we are. However, before we touch on him, let's touch on Gabriel and Havertz. I actually really like this point I made about Havertz in terms of his price and replacements. You've obviously, well, you've likely got some value accumulated in Havertz. And if he has just one more good week, that's probably going to increase again. So that's that. But the main thing is the replacements. Okay, let's say you are to downgrade to a Solanke. Does Solanke outscore him in the next 4? Well, honestly, I'm not sure. Even with the better fixtures, Solanke hasn't showed himself to this season be someone who's got a high ceiling, I would say. I don't trust him to haul even in these games. And as a result, is it really worth the transfer and the loss in value, especially when Havertz could genuinely score more? I could understand it more if you're moving to like a Matthias Cunha, but considering he has City this week and then Havertz is at home next week, could you at least wait till game week 10 to potentially do it? I think you could, and I think there's probably more efficient spots to use a transfer than selling one of the best number 9s in the league this season. Gabriel, he's just got too much attacking upside, and he plays for the best defense for me to ever really consider selling him. And also, when Arsenal are on the road away to these big sides, they lock up even more. So for me, I just think it would be such a poor move to sell Gabriel. I've seen a few considering it, and I dislike it so much. Now we can go on to Saka. Obviously, I waxed lyrical about Foden earlier, and yeah, I'm just more on board with it for all of the reasons I've listed. I just cannot have a premium asset potentially not playing. Now, the thing that's casted a seed of doubt in my mind is there's a video from Lee Judges who does genuinely have his sources, as shown by his ability to get early information on Arsenal's December kickoffs or timing, something like that. And if he's saying that, there's no real reason for me to take the risk, I think, with Foden having such nice upside in the next 3. And also, he has such a nice upside in the next 3. It's a good way to really gain rank. And my premiums in midfield will be Salah and Foden, whereas everyone else will pretty much have, well, not everyone, but a lot will have Palmer and Saka. And that's fine. I think Palmer's got really tough fixtures. I prefer Salah for this week, and Saka genuinely might not even play. And even if he does play, he'll be at reduced minutes. So you could probably tell that I am getting very close to making that transfer. And then I can bring him back pretty much whenever I like. I think given he's got 2 away fixtures in Newcastle and Chelsea, I think maybe I'll bring him back after that on a Game Week 12 wildcard, but I am steering away from using the wildcard then. I'm actually thinking about wildcarding in 19, but that is not for this video. In terms of Liverpool's elite, I think Diaz starts because there was enough of a gap between the Colombia game finishing and the game on Sunday, but maybe the expected minutes will be reduced. I do think he's actually better in the big games given what he offers. And I would say it's more of a luxurious transfer because he'd really be losing the guy because he's only going to lose, like 25 expected minutes. Trent I have in a very similar category, but it would be even more of a luxurious move. Do I think Chelsea score? I do. I think Chelsea lose 3-1, but I think they'll score. And that's obviously not great for Trent's clean sheet chances. Do I think Arsenal score next week? Yeah, probably. Do I think Brighton score against them? Well, they've got a good chance. Do I think Villa score? Well, they've definitely got a good chance as well. So in terms of clean sheet prospects, I wouldn't say I'm overly bullish in the next 4. A friend made a good point about how Trent's output could actually be better in these bigger games. And that's why I would say this is definitely a luxurious move. You are selling the greatest creative fullback of all time. And for those reasons, sure, like if you want to move him to like a 4.5 and then upgrade elsewhere, by all means do so. But I would just say this is a luxury transfer. And if you're considering rolling, by all means, just keep him for this week. He's a facilitator for a move which has a lot of upside, but he is by no means a necessary. This is more forward thinking, but United's defense, in terms of the points of their defensive assets have got, especially in Onana, have been pretty good. And we saw this last year as well. With United's game model, they are simply going to concede a decent volume of shots, and that will allow Onana to have one of the highest ceilings, if not the highest ceiling, out of any goalkeeper. That's good. De Ligt is a huge box threat, right? Watch him from set pieces. He's a big box threat, and Dalot has that open play threat. So especially from 11, this is a move that I would be considering. And I thought it was important to touch on that. Or you could even bring him in now, right? Because these are the type of fixtures. Like Brentford is the type of fixture where Onana would haul. And moving on to the midfield, I've just seen quite a bit of chat about Bruno Fernandes this week. And I don't understand it. And I cannot justify it. 8.2 million is a lot in the current game structure. If you think about it, right? You've got a lot of assets at 7.5. And then you've got a lot of assets at like 6-ish, right? And then you've got the premiums. And the only real asset you've got at 8.2 that people actually own, apart from Bruno, maybe I'm missing one, is Kai Havertz, right? And Kai Havertz has got, I think, over double the points Bruno Fernandes has got so far this season. And we're only 7 game weeks in, right? So with that in mind, on top of the fact that the system was platforming him very poorly to get returns, and the volume of chances is therefore quite low, how are you expecting to get a haul? I think you're just trying to get lucky because you know that you have 90 minutes. You know that you have penalties. You know you'll have a high volume of actions, albeit not necessarily the most attacking actions in the most dangerous positions. And he's been good in the past. So theoretically, sure, you have a good floor, but I don't think you do in actuality. And for all of those reasons, I think potentially it's slightly fear-based selecting him. And in general, I don't think there's enough logic to justify it. Thus, I would definitely be fading because he's barely been able to get one return in a game so far. And now you're going to ask him to get two because really he needs to be hauling a decent, like somewhat, right? He's taking a midfield spot and he's costing a lot. He needs to be hauling somewhat, especially when there are so many good options this year. And I just think that's unlikely. So for me, I would definitely be passing him up. I think Mbeumo can wait a week. I don't think this is the best fixture for him. He'll have a tough matchup against Dalot. There's no Kobe Mainoo, and I wonder if maybe their midfield has a bit more durability as a result. Kobe has looked a bit tired recently, and I think maybe Casemiro and Ugarte, given both will be somewhat well rested, could be pretty decent. Brentford play an intense, physical, aggressive game, and I think actually Kobe being out could potentially be a bit of a blessing. So that's that. And in general, I would say there are just other moves to make, like Foden, maybe a defensive transfer to facilitate some upside, maybe getting in on another forward, etc., where there's slightly more upside than there is with Mbeumo this week. And it serves as a very nice differential because pretty much everyone owns the guy. So to not have him for at least 1 week, you can by all means, next week, absolutely brilliant. Wow, Brentford's fixtures from an attacking standpoint look so good. But for this week, I actually think it's a nice differential to not have. Finally, some quick dilemmas I've seen in the community. I wouldn't sell Eze. I think Forest is definitely worse without Gibbs White, both going forward and defensively. Such a workhorse off the ball. Glasner, I saw an article that he might change the system. And the thing with Eze is, at least you're always going to get somewhat of a decent volume, and he'll be stationed in good areas. And as I mentioned, this is probably a week in a lot of spots where either you roll, I think, or you go for moves which capture a lot of upside. And I think selling Eze wouldn't necessarily fit into either of those categories. So I would just leave him in the side. Plus, the fixtures after this are actually pretty good. So if he catches some fire, he's an awkward price point at 6.8. He won't be super easily accessible to everyone. And people won't be super keen on bringing him back in either, I imagine, due to a slight bias psychologically. So I actually think quite nice to just have him, and I would be keeping him. Now, a few dilemmas, specifically benching ones that people have had in the community. But before that, I spoke about this maybe a couple weeks ago. You can play four at the back. Like, it's not the end of the world. If your side needs to play like a Wout Faes for 1 week, or you need to play all four of your non-4.0 defenders, it's okay. It's not the end of the world. And if it's going to benefit your squad down the line, then do so. I think people have been reluctant to do that, especially quite a few people that I speak to on a somewhat regular basis have been reluctant to do that in a few spots prior. But honestly, I think it's absolutely fine and probably advantageous. Would I start dibbling? Yes. I actually think Southampton are going to win. And if you're going to buy him and not start him for Leicester at home, then what's the point of even having him? You genuinely may as well save yourself the 0.1 million and get like a Harry Winks. I think you just absolutely have to start him this week in pretty much any and every spot. And then benching Rodgers or Semenyo, I think you could make really, really good arguments for either. And I don't exactly have a conclusive judgment on it. I can't say one is better than the other. Even the models have them pretty close. For me personally, I think if you're looking to go for the riskier route or the route with more upside, I would start Semenyo because he's probably the most likely to wipe out the Arsenal clean sheet. And if you don't have double Arsenal defense, that could be a very nice play where other managers lose their double clean sheet and you gain the goal from it. If you're looking to be a bit more safe, and I think in general it's quite a smart play just to play Rodgers. I know he was playing for the 21s, but there was a clip of him taking the mick a little bit. I think he's just so much better than the rest of them that I doubt it would have been the most intense football he's ever played. So I think if you're willing to open yourself to a bit more risk and upside, Semenyo. Otherwise, I would just go for Rodgers. Slightly shorter than usual. And like I said, energy levels on analysis probably a little bit down compared to usual. So for that, I apologize. We'll be back on Sunday, I am sure, with the usual standards. I really am considering Saka to Foden. And like I said, I will update you guys with some form of a post. But I do genuinely think I'm going to do it. So you can consider that to be the likely move. For those of you who haven't subscribed, I would really appreciate it. And good luck for this game week. I shall see you on the other side for transfer plans on Sunday. Sunday in particular is a very good day of football, so I look forward to that. Have a wonderful weekend in the meantime, and I shall see you in the comments. Goodbye.